Welcome to the channel, everyone. You're watching Weird History Facts, where we dig deep into the weird, wacky, and truly mind-blowing sides of American politics. I'm David Banuel, and in today's video, we're diving into some of the most bizarre, strange, and downright weird facts about American politics that will leave you scratching your head in disbelief. Buckle up, because what we're about to reveal will change the way you think about history forever. Before we get started, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the bell for weekly weirdness straight to your feed. We have so much crazy content lined up for you, so don't miss out. Let's kick things off with some presidential facts that will leave you questioning everything you knew about U.S. leaders. First up, let's talk about Theodore Roosevelt, a man known for his bold, larger-than-life personality. This guy was a pioneer, a conservationist, and yes, a lover of adventure in the most unexpected ways. In fact, Theodore Roosevelt once invited a lion to live with him in the White House. I know, it sounds insane, but it's true. Here's how it all went down. Back in 1909, Roosevelt was on a grand African safari as part of a scientific expedition. While he was there, he encountered a lion, which he named Jack. But Roosevelt didn't just collect the lion's carcass for the Smithsonian. He brought Jack back to the White House. Can you imagine walking down the hallways of the White House and bumping into a live lion? It wasn't all that unusual for Roosevelt, though. He was a man who lived life on his own terms, and animals were a huge part of that lifestyle. Now, don't get the wrong idea. Roosevelt wasn't running around the White House with a lion on a leash. Jack the lion was kept in a specially built cage within the White House grounds. And although the lion didn't roam free, the fact that Roosevelt had a live lion in the White House is just wild, right? He was known for his rugged approach to life and politics, so having an exotic animal like that was just another reflection of his larger-than-life persona. But Roosevelt's not the only president with a strange story. Let's take a look at another bizarre presidential fact. This one comes from John Quincy Adams, the sixth president of the United States. John Quincy Adams was a man of many firsts, but he had an early morning ritual that would raise eyebrows today. He would take swims in the Potomac River. Now, you might think that's not too strange, except he did it naked. Yep, you heard that right. Every morning, this US president would swim in the river without a stitch of clothing. Why did he do this? Well, Adams was an early riser and believed in keeping his body strong and healthy. But the whole naked swim thing? That's a whole other level of presidential eccentricity. Imagine the headlines today if a sitting president were to do that. It's definitely not the kind of story you'd expect from someone in such an esteemed position. But for Adams, it was just part of his routine. And while it might seem strange, it was part of his commitment to health and discipline. But wait, we're just warming up here. Next up, let's talk about Andrew Jackson, the seventh president of the United States. Known for his fiery temper and no-nonsense approach to leadership, Jackson once found himself in a situation so wild that it could only happen in 19th century America. Jackson was famously involved in a duel with a man named Charles Dickinson, who had insulted Jackson's wife. Now, dueling might sound like something out of a history book, but it was still an accepted form of resolving conflicts in Jackson's time. Jackson, with his quick temper, accepted Dickinson's challenge. The duel was set in 1806. Jackson, being the stubborn man he was, stood firm, despite knowing Dickinson was an expert marksman. As they stood 24 feet apart, the two men took their shots. Dickinson fired first, hitting Jackson in the chest. But guess what? Jackson didn't die. Instead, he remained standing, took a deep breath, and fired back. Jackson's shot killed Dickinson, and he walked away, not only surviving the duel but going on to have a full career in politics and eventually becoming president. Jackson's survival of that duel became part of his legend. His resilience, even in the face of near death, was a symbol of the man he was: tough, determined, and unyielding. And while duels aren't exactly a common part of modern politics, Jackson's dramatic confrontation shows just how intense and personal American politics could be in the early years of the nation. So, let's recap. Theodore Roosevelt had a lion in the White House. John Quincy Adams swam in the Potomac naked. And Andrew Jackson survived a duel with a bullet lodged in his chest. These stories aren't just quirky facts. They're glimpses into the personalities and character traits that shaped the men who led this country. As wild as these stories may sound, they reflect a time when presidents were seen as larger-than-life figures, willing to take risks, defy conventions, and sometimes even break the rules. And that's just the beginning. In the next few minutes, we'll dive even deeper into more weird and unbelievable facts about American presidents, from pets to political oddities and everything in between. So, if you're as fascinated by these strange stories as we are, make sure you stick around for what's coming next. All right, let's take a quick breather, but don't go anywhere. When we return, we've got more incredible presidential oddities, including the strangest pet choices and the quirkiest campaign strategies you won't believe actually worked. Stay tuned. All right, let's dive into some bizarre political events that had a huge impact on history, but may not be the stories you're used to hearing. These events may seem downright strange, but they significantly influenced how politics in America, and sometimes even the world, works today. Let's start with a bizarre and almost comical event that took place far from the US. But trust me, it has connections to military history that are eerily relevant. I'm talking about the Great Emu War in Australia in 1932. Yes, you heard that right, a war against birds. Here's what happened. Following World War I, the Australian government wanted to clear land for farming, but they faced a huge problem: emus. These giant birds, native to Australia, began invading farmlands in massive numbers. They ravaged crops, and farmers were desperate. In response, the government deployed military forces to eliminate the birds. Military forces, mind you, equipped with machine guns and soldiers. But here's where things get wild. Despite their superior weaponry, the soldiers were no match for the emus. The birds were fast, elusive, and incredibly resilient. The military couldn't even get close enough to shoot effectively, and after several weeks of trying to control the emu population, the military gave up. The emus had won. In a bizarre twist of fate, not only did the emus manage to defeat the military forces, But the event went down in history as one of the most unusual military failures ever recorded. While this may seem like a funny, weird event on the surface, it highlights a key point about how governments deal with unexpected threats. If you ever think political decisions are made with perfect foresight, the Great Emu War shows us that even governments with military power can get caught off guard by the most unexpected enemies, even flightless birds. Now, shifting gears to something a little more serious, yet still absolutely bizarre. The US election of 1800 was one of the most crucial and chaotic elections in American history, and it almost led to the first ever constitutional crisis in the nation's young life. So, here's the story. In 1800, Thomas Jefferson, running as the Democratic-Republican candidate, faced off against incumbent President John Adams, representing the Federalist Party. But things didn't end there. Jefferson's running mate, Aaron Burr, was also running for vice president. When all the electoral votes were tallied, Jefferson and Burr tied with 73 votes each, an unprecedented scenario. And here's where it gets really crazy. According to the US Constitution, in case of a tie, the election would go to the House of Representatives, where each state's delegation would get one vote to decide the winner. But there was a major complication. The tie led to bitter political maneuvering, with some in Congress trying to use the situation to their advantage. Now, remember, Aaron Burr and Thomas Jefferson were supposed to be on the same team. But Burr, ever the ambitious politician, began to maneuver behind the scenes, causing suspicions that he might try to seize the presidency for himself. This was a huge political scandal because if Burr had succeeded, it would have meant the first political scandal of its kind, leading to what could have been a full-blown constitutional crisis. So, for 36 long ballots in the House, the deadlock continued. It took intense pressure from influential political figures like Alexander Hamilton, yes, the same Hamilton you're probably thinking of, to break the tie and get Jefferson elected. Finally, after days of suspense, the vote broke in Jefferson's favor. But if the outcome had gone differently, the entire structure of the American political system might have been altered, changing the course of the nation's future. Now, let's stay with Aaron Burr for a moment. His political career didn't exactly end after the 1800 election. In fact, his name is forever linked with one of the most dramatic events in early American history, his infamous duel with Alexander Hamilton. In 1804, tensions between Burr and Hamilton reached a boiling point. Burr, then serving as vice president, had been insulted by Hamilton on multiple occasions, and their bitter rivalry became public. Burr, feeling his honor was at stake, challenged Hamilton to a duel. But this wasn't just any duel. It was one that would forever change the course of history. The two men met at dawn in Weehawken, New Jersey, for a deadly standoff. They stood 10 paces apart, each with a pistol. Hamilton, despite his reputation as a sharp political mind, had a history of speaking against duels, but he still accepted the challenge, probably thinking he'd never actually have to shoot. But Hamilton's pistol shot missed. Burr, on the other hand, fired and struck Hamilton in the abdomen. Hamilton was fatally wounded and died the following day. The duel marked the end of Hamilton's career and was a pivotal moment in American politics, especially as it sealed Burr's political downfall. Burr's reputation never recovered, and it's said that he never fully recovered from having taken Hamilton's life. These strange, bizarre political events all had a massive impact on how America developed politically. From the Great Emu War that showed us even the military can face unexpected challenges, to the election of 1800 that almost sent the US into a political crisis, to the infamous duel that shaped the political legacies of two of the nation's founding figures. These events remind us that even the strangest, most bizarre moments can alter the course of history. But the story doesn't end here. Next, we're going to dive into even more outlandish political happenings that shaped the country's direction. From weird laws that still linger to political alliances that no one saw coming, we've got a lot more ground to cover. Stick around, because you're not going to want to miss what comes next.
If you're enjoying this story, kindly do us a favor and subscribe to our channel. It is free and won't cost anything, but it means the world to us. We're just a small channel trying to grow. Thank you, and back to the video.
All right, let's talk about something that we all recognize but may not fully understand: political party mascots. These mascots have become so deeply ingrained in American politics that it's hard to imagine the Democratic Party without its donkey or the Republican Party without its elephant. But have you ever wondered how these animals came to represent the parties? The origins are stranger than you might think. Let's start with the Democratic Party and its most unlikely mascot, the donkey. You might be surprised to learn that the donkey wasn't originally a badge of honor for the Democrats. In fact, the donkey began as an insult. Back in 1828, when Andrew Jackson ran for president, his opponents began calling him a jackass, a term used to undermine his character. They aimed to paint him as stubborn and foolish. However, instead of rejecting this label, Jackson took a different approach. He fully embraced it, and soon the donkey became a symbol of his campaign. It was an emblem of stubbornness and determination, qualities that Jackson wanted to project to the electorate. Jackson, known for his tough, no-nonsense persona, turned the donkey from an insult into a symbol of resilience. Over time, it became closely tied to the Democratic Party, which Jackson was helping to define. Political cartoonists like Thomas Nast helped cement the donkey as the Democratic mascot in the years that followed. But there's more to the donkey's symbolism than just stubbornness. The donkey represents the working class and rural America, echoing Jackson's appeal to common folk. Over time, the Democratic Party adopted this as a symbol of the everyman and champion of the underdog. Today, the donkey is widely recognized as a symbol of the Democratic Party. From campaign posters to bumper stickers, you'll find that it remains a staple of American political imagery. Now, let's talk about the Republican Party, which has its own beloved mascot, the elephant. But unlike the donkey, the elephant's journey to prominence was driven by a cartoonist's creativity rather than an accident of fate. The story begins in the 1870s with one of America's most famous political cartoonists, Thomas Nast. Nast was a true pioneer in political satire, and he had a knack for using animals to represent political ideologies. He's the reason we have the iconic symbols for both the Republican and Democratic parties. In one of his cartoons in Harper's Weekly in 1874, Nast drew an elephant symbolizing the Republican Party. But what really made the elephant stick was the way Nast portrayed it. Large, strong, and dignified. The image of the elephant was used to represent the stability and power of the Republican Party. Initially, the elephant wasn't universally embraced as the symbol for the Republicans, but Nast's clever use of it caught on quickly. In the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Republicans began adopting the elephant as part of their official party branding. The elephant was an appropriate choice for a party that wanted to project power, tradition, and immovable strength in American politics. And so we have this strange rivalry, the donkey and the elephant. It's as if American politics decided to make animals its battleground. Can you imagine if these two animals were on the same stage during a debate? The donkey, stubborn and hardworking, trying to outlast the elephant, which stands strong and firm. It's like a David versus Goliath story with very different characters. But beyond the fun and games, these symbols have deep cultural significance. They reflect the ideological battles between the two parties, the Democrats embracing the underdog and the working class, while the Republicans emphasize tradition, strength, and stability. While the donkey and elephant started as simple caricatures, they've evolved into much more. They represent the identity of each party. These symbols are used in everything from campaign slogans to social media posts, making them an essential part of modern political discourse. You can't go to a political rally without seeing a donkey or elephant plastered on banners, t-shirts, and flags. And think about the memes. Who hasn't seen a picture of a donkey with some funny commentary or an elephant in a political cartoon? They've become shorthand for the parties themselves. The donkey is associated with liberal values, often in a lighthearted, humorous context, and the elephant with conservative principles, symbolizing resilience and fortitude. But let's not forget that there are other political mascots out there, even if they aren't as famous as the donkey and elephant. For example, the Green Party has used a tree as its mascot, symbolizing environmentalism and sustainability. The Libertarian Party has chosen the porcupine, a quirky, prickly animal that embodies the idea of personal freedom and minimal government intervention. While these symbols may not be as iconic as the donkey and elephant, they reflect the unique values and beliefs of these political movements. At the end of the day, these political mascots have become so much more than just logos or symbols. They've evolved into icons of political identity. They make it easier for voters to align themselves with a party's values and messages, and they often help simplify complex political debates. These mascots give us an immediate visual cue about who we're dealing with, and they can even influence the tone of political discourse. Whether you love them or find them a bit too playful, there's no denying the powerful role these mascots play in shaping the culture around American politics. So the next time you see a donkey or elephant, remember that there's a strange, historic origin behind these symbols. They may seem like innocent cartoonish figures now, but they've been central to the way political parties express themselves and engage with voters for nearly 2 centuries. Welcome back. Now we're about to dive into some of the most bizarre, head-scratching, and unconventional campaign strategies that not only left people wondering, what were they thinking, but also actually helped these candidates win elections. Let's take a look at some of the weirdest yet effective campaign strategies in American history. Our first strategy comes from the 1964 presidential race, where President Lyndon B. Johnson's campaign launched a single ad, but what a single ad it was. Known as the Daisy ad, this 60-second spot is considered one of the most powerful and perhaps the most chilling political ads ever aired. The ad features a young girl counting the petals of a daisy, which slowly turns into a countdown to a nuclear explosion. The message was clear and chilling. If Barry Goldwater, Johnson's opponent, became president, His stance on nuclear warfare could lead to a global catastrophe. The ad subtly played on fears of nuclear war during the Cold War era. Though the ad only aired once, its impact was massive. The implication was that Goldwater was too reckless with his policies and that his election could mean the end of civilization as we know it. The media frenzy surrounding the ad led to public outcry, but it also solidified Johnson's reputation as a protector of peace. It wasn't just the content of the ad that made it effective. The strategy here was brilliant. It was all about fear. By planting that seed of fear in voters' minds, Johnson's campaign took advantage of Cold War anxieties and positioned themselves as the safeguard against disaster. The ad worked, and Johnson went on to win the election in a landslide. The Daisy ad not only remains a textbook example of political fear-mongering, but also set the stage for future political ads. The lesson here? Sometimes, one ad can shift the tide of an entire election. Next, we turn to one of the most politically astute and controversial figures in American politics, Richard Nixon. In 1968, Nixon was facing off against Vice President Hubert Humphrey in the midst of social upheaval, anti-Vietnam War protests, and civil rights struggles. Nixon needed a way to reach voters who felt alienated by the cultural changes of the 1960s. And that's when he unveiled the silent majority strategy, which turned out to be one of the most successful political maneuvers in modern American history. Nixon's strategy was simple. He sought to appeal to the quiet Americans, the working class, suburban, and middle-class citizens who felt their voices were being drowned out by the loud, protesting minority. These were the people who were fed up with the chaos and wanted stability. Nixon's campaign coined the term silent majority to represent this group, and he promised them that he would bring order back to the nation. The key to this strategy's success was that Nixon didn't just speak to the conservative base. He spoke to a larger, often overlooked demographic, the white middle class, many of whom were uneasy about the cultural shifts happening in America. They didn't like the anti-war protests, the civil rights movements, or the hippie counterculture. By framing them as the silent majority, Nixon made them feel important, powerful, and validated. At the time, Nixon's opponents were deeply divided and focused on different issues, like Vietnam, civil rights, and protests. Nixon capitalized on this division by presenting himself as the candidate of peace, law and order, and stability. He was offering a solution to what many Americans perceived as a country in turmoil. Nixon's appeal to the silent majority worked. His campaign played on the fears and frustrations of many voters who felt that their way of life was under attack. In the end, Nixon won the election, and the silent majority became a rallying cry for conservative politics in the years to come. Shifting to a more optimistic strategy, let's look at Ronald Reagan's 1984 re-election campaign. By then, Reagan had already won over the hearts of many Americans, but his 1984 campaign would introduce a new level of political messaging, and one that would be remembered as a shining example of hope and unity. Reagan's 1984 campaign was all about optimism. The Morning in America ad, in particular, was a breathtaking piece of political marketing. It depicted an idealized vision of America, with families and communities thriving. The message was simple. Under Reagan's leadership, America was morning again. It was a time of new beginnings, of economic recovery, and of a resurgent American spirit. Reagan was re-elected in a landslide, The ad helped solidify his image as a president who was restoring American pride and prosperity. At a time when the country was still recovering from economic struggles, the ad created a sense of hope. Reagan was able to convince voters that his leadership had turned the country around and that America was ready for the future. What made this strategy so effective was its emotional resonance. Reagan didn't just talk about policies, he painted a picture of a better future. In politics, that sense of hope and optimism can be more powerful than any policy proposal. Fast forward to 2016, and we have one of the most unconventional, controversial, and ultimately successful campaign strategies in modern political history: Donald Trump's "Make America Great Again" slogan. The slogan itself might seem simple, but it resonated deeply with a large portion of the American electorate. Trump's campaign took advantage of discontent among certain groups of voters, particularly those who felt left behind by globalization and changing social dynamics. The message was clear: America had lost its greatness, but under Trump's leadership, it could return to its former glory. Trump's slogan appealed to a sense of nostalgia and patriotism. It was a message that looked back to a time when many Americans felt the country was at its peak, economically strong and globally dominant. By tapping into this sentiment, Trump connected with voters who were frustrated with the political establishment and wanted change. While Trump's slogan polarized the country, it undeniably helped him secure a victory in 2016. The "Make America Great Again" message was an effective tool for galvanizing a movement that felt unheard, and it became a rallying cry for his supporters. Finally, let's look back at Barack Obama's 2008 campaign, which brought a new voice and energy to American politics. His slogan, "Yes, we can," was simple but powerful. It became a symbol of hope, change, and the belief that a better future was within reach. "Yes, we can" was more than just a slogan. It was a call to action. It inspired a generation of voters who were tired of the status quo and ready for a change in leadership. The phrase had an emotional power that connected with Americans on a personal level. It spoke to optimism, to unity, and to the belief that together, anything was possible. Obama's use of this slogan was an example of how a positive, inclusive message can galvanize a movement. It was instrumental in helping him win the 2008 election, and it remains one of the most memorable political slogans in modern American history. As we've seen, the weirdest and most unconventional campaign strategies often work because they tap into deep emotions and powerful sentiments. Whether it's fear, hope, nostalgia, or a desire for change, the key to success is knowing how to connect with the electorate on a personal and emotional level. So, the next time you see an ad or hear a slogan that makes you scratch your head, remember that sometimes the strangest ideas are the ones that win the race. Now, we've explored some weird facts about American politics, but what about the quirky pets that some US presidents had? From raccoons to camels, the White House has hosted some bizarre and unexpected residents that made their mark in history. Let's dive into the world of presidential pets and explore how these unique companions influenced American politics, culture, and even public opinion. Let's start with Calvin Coolidge, the 30th President of the United States. Coolidge and his wife, Grace, were known for having a number of pets during their time in office. But perhaps the most unusual of all was a pet raccoon named Rebecca. Rebecca was sent to Coolidge as a Thanksgiving gift by a man from Mississippi. Initially intended to be a feast for the president's family, Rebecca instead became a beloved companion. In a true display of the bizarre nature of presidential pets, Rebecca didn't just live in the White House. She roamed the grounds freely, climbing trees, eating from the kitchen, and even visiting the Coolidges in the family's quarters. Rebecca's presence was seen as a symbol of the unique connection between Coolidge and the American people. She became a media sensation, bringing a sense of lightheartedness to a time that was otherwise filled with serious political discourse, particularly during the Roaring Twenties. People loved the image of a president who could take a break from the daily grind and enjoy the company of such a quirky animal. Not only did Rebecca serve as a curious distraction, but she also became part of the Coolidge family's legacy of eccentricity, a hallmark of the Coolidge administration. Her antics gave the American public a more human side of their president, showing that even the most powerful figures can have fun and enjoy the unexpected things in life. Next, we move on to President John F. Kennedy. Known for his youthful energy and enthusiasm, Kennedy's time in the White House was filled with interesting moments, many of them involving animals. However, perhaps the most unexpected of all was the brief stint of a pet camel named Sergeant. Yes, you heard that right. A camel in the White House. Sergeant wasn't a permanent resident, but he certainly made an impression during his time at the White House. This unusual creature was a gift from a Middle Eastern diplomat and was meant to symbolize American relations with the Arab world. Sergeant was not exactly a typical household pet. He was allowed to roam the grounds of the White House, causing quite a stir among visitors and staff. According to reports, the camel loved hanging around the presidential lawn, often making surprise appearances when the Kennedy children were playing outside. Though Sergeant's time at the White House was short-lived, he represented something greater: the international diplomacy and cultural connections that were a significant part of JFK's presidency. At a time when the United States was fostering deeper ties with the Middle East, the presence of a camel, especially in such a whimsical context, highlighted Kennedy's desire to embrace global relations in an accessible and sometimes playful manner. Kennedy's use of such a bizarre gift was also a savvy move in terms of public relations. The camel was a symbol of goodwill, but it also made for great media coverage. The image of a camel grazing at the White House became an iconic symbol of JFK's charm and his ability to connect with people in unique ways. Just imagine the headlines: "Camel joins the first family." Let's go back in time a little further to President Theodore Roosevelt. Roosevelt was known for his love of nature and the outdoors, and his presidency reflected his adventurous spirit. But what you may not know is that his family had an entire menagerie of unusual pets, ranging from wild animals to household companions. During Roosevelt's time in office, the White House became a veritable zoo. His children had a pet snake, a badger named Josiah, and even a hyena. But it wasn't just these wild creatures that made an impression. Roosevelt himself had a heroic pet that would go down in history: his beloved dog, Skip. Roosevelt's family took an active interest in the care of their pets, and this connection to nature resonated with the American people. It was also a reflection of Roosevelt's larger-than-life persona. Known for his bold, adventurous spirit, his pets became symbols of his larger philosophy: the importance of resilience and strength in both the natural and political worlds. Roosevelt's wild pets weren't just for show. They helped shape his image as a strong, fearless leader. For a country that was on the brink of the 20th century, Roosevelt's fondness for unpredictable, wild animals made him appear rugged, tough, and unafraid to take risks. And in many ways, his pet choices paralleled his progressive political agenda. Now, let's take a look at one of the more comical episodes in presidential pet history, President Jimmy Carter's pet rabbit named Grits. In 1979, while President Carter was on a fishing trip in his hometown of Plains, Georgia, he was famously attacked by a wild rabbit while he was out on a boat. The media quickly latched onto the story, and soon, Grits the rabbit was the subject of national attention. At first, the story of the rabbit may have seemed humorous, but it actually had significant implications for Carter's public image. The image of the president in a moment of vulnerability, struggling with a wild animal, made for a great visual for the media to exploit. While many Americans found the story amusing, it was also a symbol of Carter's connection to the working class, rural South. Grits the rabbit became more than just a pet. He was a symbol of the down-to-earth persona that Carter tried to project throughout his campaign. But the media coverage also revealed a bit of an awkward side to his presidency. For some, it was a moment of levity, while for others, it became a reflection of Carter's struggle to maintain control of his public image. And lastly, we can't forget the famous cats of the Clinton White House. Bill Clinton and his family had two cats that became national sensations: Socks the cat and Buddy the cat. While Socks was the more famous of the two, Buddy also had his moments of fame. Socks, the Clinton family's beloved cat, became the first cat of the White House in the 1990s. Socks was more than just a pet, he was a media star. His appearances at White House events, his interactions with the press, and his cuddly image became a symbol of warmth and familiarity during the Clinton administration. He even had his own fan mail. Pets like Socks were a tool of soft diplomacy, showing the American people that the first family was relatable and approachable. They helped humanize the Clintons during their time in office, much like how other pets have done for other presidents before them. As we've seen, presidential pets are often much more than just companions. They become part of the broader narrative of a president's personality and public image. From Rebecca the raccoon to the camel named Sergeant, these unusual animals bring a little bit of whimsy into the world of politics, while also providing insight into the personal lives of the individuals who lead the country. Sometimes, it's the most unexpected elements, like a pet, that can make a lasting impact on American political history. Conspiracy theories, a topic that never fails to intrigue, captivate, and sometimes bewilder. American politics has seen its fair share of bizarre, outrageous, and downright outlandish theories. From the idea that powerful figures orchestrated major events to accusations of secret deals behind closed doors, these theories have not only shaped public perception but have often become part of the political folklore. Today, we're diving into some of the strangest claims that have shaken American politics. Let's get started. First up, we have a theory surrounding the iconic Franklin D. Roosevelt, the 32nd President of the United States. Now, FDR is widely remembered for his leadership during the Great Depression and World War II. But there's a bizarre conspiracy theory suggesting that he had a secret pact with the mafia to secure his victory in the 1932 election. The theory goes that, in exchange for FDR's political support, the mafia helped him win key cities, particularly in swing states like New York. According to this theory, The mafia used its influence over labor unions and political machines to sway the vote in FDR's favor. The alleged rationale was that the mafia, in turn, would expect favorable treatment for their businesses and operations once Roosevelt took office. While there is no solid proof to support the claim, the idea gained traction because of the influence organized crime had in certain cities during that time. Some political analysts suggest that FDR's strategic appointments and his apparent leniency towards certain criminal activities were seen as signs that the theory might hold water. But is there any truth to it? Well, many historians dismiss the notion, citing the complex nature of Roosevelt's victory and his overwhelming support from the American people, particularly in light of the economic crisis. While the mafia's role in politics has been documented throughout history, the claim that they played a direct role in Roosevelt's 1932 election remains unproven. Still, it's a reminder of the lengths some conspiracy theorists will go to when piecing together power dynamics and political victories. Now, moving on to one of the most persistent and controversial conspiracy theories in American political history, the assassination of President John F. Kennedy. For decades, there has been a theory that President Lyndon B. Johnson, who succeeded JFK, had prior knowledge of or even played a part in the tragic events of November 22, 1963. The theory suggests that LBJ had a personal and political motivation to be involved in JFK's assassination, claiming that Johnson was frustrated with his position as vice president and saw an opportunity to take the presidency by any means necessary. One version of the theory even alleges that LBJ had advanced knowledge of a plot to kill Kennedy and allowed it to happen in order to secure the presidency for himself. Proponents of this theory point to LBJ's political ambitions, the strained relationship he had with JFK, and the quick ascension to power that followed Kennedy's death. Another point often cited by theorists is the mysterious nature of the assassination itself. The fact that Lee Harvey Oswald was caught and killed so quickly, the inconsistencies in the Warren Commission report, and the various conflicting witness testimonies have fueled the fire for conspiracy theorists. Some even claim that LBJ had connections to certain individuals within the Texas oil industry, which some believe had an interest in eliminating JFK. Although no concrete evidence has ever emerged to substantiate these claims, the JFK assassination conspiracy theories remain alive and well. The theory that LBJ was involved or had prior knowledge is one of the most widely discussed. But as with many political conspiracies, the line between speculation and fact is often blurred. Shifting gears to a more recent conspiracy theory, the infamous birther movement that questioned whether President Barack Obama was born in the United States. The birther theory claims that Obama was not a natural-born American citizen and that he was secretly born in Kenya, making him ineligible to serve as president. The movement was largely popularized by certain political figures, including Donald Trump, who repeatedly demanded Obama release his birth certificate to prove his legitimacy. Despite Obama's release of his long-form birth certificate in 2011, the theory persisted. The birther movement fueled much of the political discourse surrounding Obama's presidency, with some people adamantly refusing to accept the evidence provided. It's a striking example of how conspiracy theories can continue to thrive, even in the face of clear evidence to the contrary. The birther theory played a significant role in shaping Obama's early presidency. It created a cloud of doubt around his legitimacy, contributing to racial and political tensions in the United States. While the movement was ultimately discredited, Its persistence highlighted the divisiveness of American politics during that time. Next, we have the theory of the deep state. This idea suggests that a shadowy network of bureaucrats, military officials, and intelligence agencies secretly runs the U.S. government, often working against the will of elected officials and the American people. The deep state conspiracy gained significant traction in the 2010s, particularly in the wake of political scandals and growing distrust in government institutions. Proponents of the theory argue that powerful elites manipulate U.S. policy from behind the scenes, orchestrating events to maintain their control over the country's direction, regardless of who is in office. The theory has been fueled by various political events and the rise of social media, where alternative voices can rapidly amplify claims of corruption and governmental overreach. While many mainstream politicians and pundits dismiss the idea of a deep state as a baseless conspiracy, it has become a central narrative for a number of political movements in recent years. The concept of a deep state plays into the broader distrust of government institutions that has been growing in the U.S. It taps into the fears that the system is rigged and that there are powerful forces working behind the scenes to control American politics for their own benefit. Whether there is any truth to it or not, the idea has become a powerful part of political discourse,
Stop the steal.
particularly in
Trump
recent
win
years.
big.
And lastly, we can't ignore the most recent and arguably the most widely discussed conspiracy theory in American politics: the claim that the 2020 presidential election was rigged or stolen from Donald Trump. In the aftermath of the 2020 election, President Trump and many of his supporters alleged that widespread voter fraud occurred and that the election was stolen. These claims, despite being debunked by numerous courts and election officials, sparked a nationwide debate about the legitimacy of the election process. The stolen election conspiracy became a rallying cry for many, culminating in the January 6, 2021, Capitol insurrection, where rioters stormed the Capitol building in an attempt to overturn the results. This conspiracy theory not only damaged public trust in the electoral system, but also deepened the political divide in the United States. While the claims of widespread voter fraud were ultimately proven to be false, the impact of this conspiracy continues to resonate in American politics. It serves as a stark reminder of the power of misinformation in shaping political narratives and the dangerous consequences that can arise when conspiracy theories take root in the public consciousness. As we've seen today, conspiracy theories have always played a part in American politics, from the mafia's alleged role in FDR's election to the current deep state and election fraud claims. Whether they hold any truth or not, these theories shape political discourse, influence public opinion, and often leave lasting marks on history. Thanks for joining me as we explored some of the most bizarre and thought-provoking political conspiracies. Until next time, stay curious, stay skeptical, and keep questioning the world around you. Politics is full of strange bedfellows, and some of the most unlikely alliances have shaped history. From merging completely opposite ideologies to temporary political marriages of convenience, these bizarre political partnerships have led to decisions that we still talk about today. In this segment, we're diving into some of the oddest political alliances in history. Buckle up. This is going to get interesting. Let's start with a political pairing from the 19th century that's sure to raise eyebrows: the alliance between the Whig Party and the Know Nothing Party. It's a political partnership that makes you wonder how the two even found common ground. In the 1850s, America was undergoing significant social and political changes. The Whig Party, which had traditionally supported moderate policies, found itself at odds with the more radical factions of American politics. Enter the Know Nothing Party, which was a nativist, anti-immigrant group that focused on restricting the rights of immigrants, especially Catholics, and advocating for a nativist America. Now, you might be wondering, how in the world could these two parties ever team up? Well, while the Whigs and the Know Nothings had very different political ideologies, with the Whigs more focused on business interests and the Know Nothings on preserving Protestant values, both parties found themselves united by their opposition to the growing influence of the Democratic Party and the spread of slavery into new territories. The alliance was short-lived and more of a tactical move than an ideological partnership. The two parties briefly cooperated during the mid-1850s, mainly to challenge the dominance of the Democrats in key states like New York and Pennsylvania. However, their differences were too vast, and the relationship soon fell apart. The Whigs eventually disbanded, and many of their members, including future presidents Abraham Lincoln and Ulysses S. Grant, went on to form the Republican Party. Despite the alliance being a failed experiment, it's a fascinating example of how political expediency can lead to strange and sometimes contradictory partnerships. The fact that two ideologically opposed groups could join forces, even if just for a short while, shows just how flexible politics can be when survival is at stake. Fast forward to the 1980s, a time when the Cold War was at its peak. The US and the Soviet Union were locked in a decades-long ideological struggle, with both sides committed to spreading their political systems globally. So, what could possibly bring these bitter enemies together? Believe it or not, a surprising political alliance took shape under President Ronald Reagan. Reagan, a staunch anti-communist, had spent much of his early political career denouncing the Soviet Union. Yet, in a remarkable shift by the mid-1980s, Reagan found himself sitting across the table from Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev in a series of summit meetings that would change the course of history. Despite the long-standing hostility between the US and the USSR, both leaders were motivated by similar goals: reducing the threat of nuclear war and addressing the economic strains that each country was facing. Reagan, in particular, had escalated the arms race early in his presidency, but by the time he met Gorbachev, he realized that the US and the Soviet Union were headed towards mutually assured destruction if they didn't make some serious concessions. Reagan and Gorbachev, through several rounds of negotiations, came to an agreement on arms control, ultimately signing the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty in 1987. This treaty was a groundbreaking step toward nuclear disarmament and marked a pivotal moment in the Cold War. It was the first time both nations agreed to reduce their nuclear arsenals rather than build them up. Now, for many, this was a shocking development. How could the US and the USSR, sworn enemies for decades, sit down and work toward peace? It was a strange alliance forged by necessity, but it proved that sometimes, even the most unlikely partnerships can lead to historic change. Reagan's relationship with Gorbachev is a perfect example of the unpredictability of international relations. What started as one of the most intense rivalries in history evolved into a diplomatic breakthrough that helped bring about the end of the Cold War. It shows that politics, while often defined by conflict, can also be shaped by cooperation between even the most unlikely of allies. Now, let's take it all the way back to the founding days of the United States. The first two major political parties in the country, the Democratic-Republican Party, led by Thomas Jefferson, and the Federalist Party, led by Alexander Hamilton, were deeply divided on issues like the role of government and foreign policy. The Democratic Republicans were staunchly opposed to centralized government and wanted to prioritize states' rights, while the Federalists favored a strong central government and a closer relationship with Britain. The two factions had nearly irreconcilable differences on many fronts. But despite their intense political rivalry, these two parties found themselves aligning on a major issue: their shared fear of British influence. Both parties realized that Britain, with its powerful navy and economic prowess, posed a serious threat to the newly formed United States. In the 1790s, both the Democratic Republicans and the Federalists worked together in an uneasy alliance to ensure that the U.S. would not fall under British influence again. They unified to prevent foreign intervention in the young country's affairs and to ensure the nation's independence, even though their ideas on governance were fundamentally different. While this was not a formal alliance, it's interesting to note that both parties were willing to set aside their differences in the face of a common enemy. This unusual cooperation helped secure America's sovereignty and laid the groundwork for the nation's early foreign policy. These kinds of alliances, born out of necessity, demonstrate how political dynamics can shift when the survival of a nation or a cause is at stake. Despite their ideological differences, these early American political leaders were able to work together, proving that sometimes unity can be found in the most unexpected places. One of the most shocking alliances in modern history was between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union in 1939. It sounds almost like a bad joke, two regimes that were diametrically opposed in ideology: Adolf Hitler's fascist Nazi regime and Joseph Stalin's communist Soviet Union, forming a political partnership. In 1939, Hitler and Stalin signed the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, a non-aggression treaty that shocked the world. The pact promised that neither nation would attack the other, and it effectively neutralized the threat of a two-front war for Nazi Germany. For Hitler, the pact allowed Germany to focus its military efforts on Western Europe without worrying about a Soviet attack in the East. For Stalin, the deal bought time to prepare for an inevitable confrontation with Nazi Germany, while also securing Soviet territorial interests in Eastern Europe, particularly in Poland. Despite the pact's practical benefits for both countries, it was a highly cynical and temporary alliance. The Soviet Union and Nazi Germany were ideologically incompatible, one built on totalitarian communism and the other on fascist nationalism. But for a brief moment, their shared interests led to one of the most improbable and dangerous political alliances in history. The Nazi-Soviet pact lasted until 1941, when Hitler broke the agreement and invaded the Soviet Union, launching the Eastern Front of World War II. But during that short period, this odd alliance altered the course of history and reminded us that politics, as strange as it may seem, is often about strategic convenience rather than long-term compatibility. So there you have it, political alliances that defy logic, from 19th century American parties to global power plays between Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union. These alliances remind us that, in politics, strange things happen, and sometimes the best-laid plans don't always follow ideological lines. Stay tuned for more surprising facts and twists in American politics, because, as we know, it's never quite as straightforward as it seems.
If you like our video, please subscribe to our channel, click like and the notification bell to get more of our videos. Thanks for watching.
How well do you know weird political facts? Now, let's test how well you know your weird political facts with a quick quiz. You'll see questions on the screen, and I want you to answer them in the comments below. If you get them all right, you might just get a shout out in our next video. Question 1. Who was the first president of the United States? A. Thomas Jefferson, B. George Washington, C. Abraham Lincoln, D. John Adams. Question 2. Which U.S. president issued the Emancipation Proclamation, freeing enslaved people in Confederate States? Andrew Jackson, B. Ulysses S. Grant, C. Abraham Lincoln, D. James Madison. Question 3. Who was the only U.S. president to resign from office? Lyndon B. Johnson, B. Richard Nixon, C. Gerald Ford, D. Bill Clinton. Question 4. Which president signed the Civil Rights Act of 1964 into law? A. John F. Kennedy, B. Lyndon B. Johnson, C. Dwight D. Eisenhower, D. Franklin D. Roosevelt. Question 5. Who was president during the Great Depression and World War II? A. Franklin D. Roosevelt, B. Herbert Hoover, C. Harry S. Truman, D. Woodrow Wilson. Question 6. Who was the youngest elected president in U.S. history? A. Barack Obama, B. Theodore Roosevelt, C. John F. Kennedy, D. Bill Clinton. Question 7. Which U.S. president signed the Affordable Care Act, Obamacare? Joe Biden, B. George W. Bush, C. Barack Obama, D. Donald Trump. Question 8. Who was the U.S. president when 9/11 attacks happened in 2001? A. Bill Clinton, B. George W. Bush, C. Barack Obama, D. Donald Trump. So, there you have it, some of the most bizarre facts in American politics. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a thumbs up and leave a comment with your favorite weird political fact. And if you want to dive deeper into these strange and interesting topics, be sure to subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss out on a new episode of Political Weirdness.
If you like our video, please subscribe to our channel, click like and the notification bell to get more of our videos. Thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching, and until next time, stay curious and keep exploring the weird side of politics.